I have a few experiences from the museum where I work that I would like to share. Before taking over as the curator last year, I was absolutely not a believer in the paranormal. It's not that I'm religious. I was just raised to believe that when you die, that's it. You see, my father was a long-time atheist, and as such, brushed off his beliefs onto me and my 4 siblings. He wasn't close-minded, and he promised us that when he should die, if there were indeed an afterlife, that he would do everything and anything in his power to prove it to us. We lost him unexpectedly in 2009, and I'm not saying that I didn't experience anything unusual or inexplicable, but I'm getting off track. Those are stories for another day. Anyway, a little backstory on the museum. It's located in the 3rd largest city in Pennsylvania, in an old house built in the 1700s by Charles and Sarah Bieber. When I took over last year, the director and former curator were sure to tell me that it's believed the Bieber family still inhabit the home, and to not be afraid of what I see or hear. And at the time, I brushed it off. However, over the past 3 weeks, I have been working alone at night, setting up a new exhibition, and I have most certainly seen and heard some things which prove just how ignorant I was. Now onto the stories. Let's start with the first one. It was a Tuesday evening when I first encountered a member of the Bieber family. I had my back turned to the room, facing a chicken wire assemblage that I was creating on the wall. Every time I'm in that museum, I feel like I'm being watched, but this time, I knew it. Suddenly, standing directly behind me, I felt and heard the sound of a woman coughing, and turned around to see a flash of a blue and white pinstriped dress twirling away up the stairs. I walked over to confront the intruder and snap some lights on, but the woman was gone. I heard a door creak open from the 2nd level and shouted, "Hello? Is someone here?" I was answered by heavy, clunking boots walking towards the landing. I heard very clearly a man take breath and begin whistling a tune as he walked closer. Of course, I still saw nothing, and the whistling was getting closer, so in a frenzy I shut off the light and locked the door behind me. The second time I encountered the family was the following evening. I had dragged my boyfriend along with me so that I didn't have to come alone into the house. He had gone upstairs to use the restroom when I heard tiny footsteps walk into the room. I spun around from the paper and chicken wire to see a young girl, no older than 6 or 7 years old, standing in the doorway with long blonde curls and a white dress. She turned and ran in the opposite direction, and again I followed. She ran around the corner of the next room, past the restroom, and into the dark hallway that leads into the basement, and then back into the room where we came from. As I emerged back into the room, she was gone. My boyfriend came back, and we resumed our work for another 20 minutes, when we heard the door creak again from upstairs, and again came the heavy, clunking boots down the hall, and the tune began again. I looked at my boyfriend and he was staring at me horrified. He asked me if I heard it again. We shut off the lights and got the heck out of there. My boyfriend Luke and I went on holiday to Mexico in April last year. Upon coming back, I was going through our suitcases to wash various items of clothing, and I came along a tiny statue of what looked like a woman on her knees praying to the sun. I asked Luke about it, and he said that him and another guy from the group of friends that went with us were out and saw it leaning against a tree stump. Him, being him, thought this statue was the best thing since sliced bread, and he shoved it in his suitcase and brought it home with us. I thought it was a bit weird as the statue itself was made out of wood and wasn't very flattering. Luke placed it on a table in the hallway between our Yankee candles. I'd like to say it was about a week later, and I was coming down the stairs to the hallway into the living room, when I noticed that it seemed colder by the table. I took this to being a draft coming from the front door, and made sure I shut the living room door behind me in an attempt to keep it from coming in there. Small things started to happen. My keys, that I always put on a hook in the kitchen, would be in the middle of the living room, resting on the rug when I would wake. We have no pets, and I know Luke wouldn't do something so petty to try and mess with me. I had to keep changing the light bulbs in the hallway, and the phone that was on the table would go off sporadically at all times of the day. I would answer and hear static. Sometimes I'd hear a faint mumbling over it. There were times when I would get ready for bed, just about to lay my head down on the pillow, and I would pull out that wooden statue. Somehow it had made its way under my pillow, and this happened 5 to 7 times. I was home alone one night, and I was watching TV in the living room, when I saw a shape of black smoke in the hallway, lingering there like it was watching me in the TV reflection. I dared not move my head towards it, and acted like I was totally engrossed in the show I was watching. I could see it in the corner of my eye, but I was too scared to move. It slowly faded away and moved further into the hallway. Me being a big baby, I didn't move and carried on watching my show. I brushed it off with the thought that maybe if I don't show any interest in it, it will go away. When my boyfriend got home, I asked him if he wanted to go to McDonald's to get a McFlurry. He jumped at the chance. I wanted to get out of the house to talk to him about what I'd seen. Sitting there in the car park, I blurted out the events of the night. He sat quietly, and I expected him not to believe me and laugh. Luke said he's been seeing the smoke too, but sometimes it was in the doorway when he woke up. He would rub his eyes and it would still be there, then vanish. We thought about the timeline and realised that all of this happened shortly after finding the statue in the suitcase. That night when we got back, we took the statue into the garden and burnt it. Nothing has happened since, and the house somehow feels lighter and warmer. I had a friend that I knew for almost 4 to 5 years. I met him when I was only 11, and he was about 19 or 20. Despite the shady age difference, he never did anything that would make me think he was a creep. He was protective, yes, but in a fatherly way. My father was deployed in Iraq when I was 10, so he was the substitute whilst my dad was miles away. We usually talked over Skype, and we would talk for hours at a time. I had a friend who also used to talk to him, but not as often as I did. Almost a year ago he died in a car accident with his cousin in Europe, and of course I grieved. But it wasn't often that I would cry over anything, but this somehow hit me hard. So I've always been someone who trusts their gut, and strangely enough, even my dreams. It may sound crazy, but I've had small harmless dreams which I experienced the same thing a couple of days after. Well, one night I had a dream. I don't remember much of it, and I always just thought it was a stupid, weird dream. But anyway, I was outside at someone's house. We were jumping around on a junk pile, and we were just having a good time. There was a fallen tree leaning against the pile, and I don't recall much else from the dream, but mostly the scene and place I was in. Of course, it didn't bother me. It wasn't scary in any way, so it didn't worry me. A couple of weeks later, my mum suggests I spend a week or two at my cousin's house, who lives out in the country. Of course, I accept the offer, and since I wanted to get out of the house for a little bit that weekend, I headed down to where they live. They had a huge yard with a silo, a barn, and a worn down hog barn right next to it. Right next to the hog barn was a large pile of metal sticks, rugs, and basically a bunch of trash. Next to that was the tree. It was split in half, with one half leaning against the scrap pile. I didn't quite think of the dream then, since my memory gets pretty bad at times, so I just saw it as normal. The first week goes by, and my cousin suggests we go outside for a bit. I agree, finding nothing else to do in their home, and we go out. We walk around, talk, and before we make it to the scrap pile, I was the one who suggested we climb it, and so we did. We both climbed to the top and found cozy places to sit. I sat on one of the branches of the broken tree, and she sat further across the pile on an old rolled up rug. I can get pretty hyper at times, and it makes it hard for me to sit still, so I started bouncing on the branch. Of course, an 160-pound girl bouncing constantly on the branch is going to make it snap, and that's what it did. It snapped off the tree and fell. I fell straight on my back onto an old gutter that was facing down. The sudden events left me shocked and unable to move, and I was slowly rolling over off the gutter. Below the gutter was a thick metal piece. A sharp, jutted part of the metal was sticking up and was surely going to impale me if I continued rolling. As I rolled though, I felt someone grab my arm. They pulled me back to balance on the gutter, and I was able to sit up safely and balance myself. My first assumption was that it was my cousin who helped me, but this is the creepy part. I was about to thank my cousin for practically saving me, but then I realised she wasn't even halfway across the pile. Her foot fell through a screen, and she couldn't get to me in time. Apparently I had rolled myself back before I rolled off, but I swore I felt someone pulling me back. Someone who probably saved me from being impaled and getting severely injured or worse. I immediately told my aunt about this, and soon my mother. My mother agreed with me that it could have been anything, but we were both convinced that it could have been my father figure, and he's still watching over me. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed these stories, and if you have an experience you want to share, be sure to send them to my email, which can be found in the description below. Also, we're going to start releasing horror shorts every once in a while, and we'd love your comments on them when they're released, so keep an eye out for that. And if you haven't already, now's the time to hit that subscribe button. Go on, you know you want to. Finally, what content do you want to see in the next video? Leave a comment to let us know, and be sure to spam that like button before you click off. But for now, thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.